For folks who may be new to this session, this is actually session 2. We kickstarted this new series called System Design. And as part of the series, we essentially approach a different topic at each of the session, which will hopefully give you a flavor of system design and also expose you to a lot of interesting problem areas and challenges. And hopefully everyone has a takeaway after each of this session. One thing I want to highlight is I want this to be a very interactive session. Nobody hates a dull presentation as much as I do. So I'm going to try my best to make this as interactive as possible. Whenever you have any question or you have any responses for any questions that may have been asked, feel free to drop your response in the Zoom chat. I'll try my best to take a look at that question, or our volunteers, Catherine and Pooja, will help coordinate any Q&A for any questions that may not have been answered. We'll also have a Q&A session towards the end for any open-ended questions. And one thing I also like to do is I also like to ask for feedback from folks for future sessions, so we can ensure that the content that we are putting together is something that's useful and something that folks might be interested in. So having said that, I'm going to go ahead to the next slide. So next up, wanted to give you all a quick intro into the agenda. So at a very high level, I think this should be fine. Okay, so at a very high level, we are essentially going to talk about, why search is important, and then dive into the two problems, which I've kind of broken it down into two parts to make it more interesting and to also kind of make it a bit more modular per se. So hopefully each and everyone here has a takeaway of having learned something about search. And hopefully that's also interesting and exciting to you all. And next up, I wanted to give a quick intro. I am currently an engineering leader at 1Password. Previously, I've had, I worked at companies of different sizes and shapes as a founding engineer, as a manager, as an IC, in a lot of different roles. A motto that I try to look up to is "Lift as we climb." This is actually a motto from the women's suffrage movement, and it wouldn't be me if I did not pitch for 1Password. If you are looking for a way to actually safeguard all of your information and have a way for organizing and securely storing a lot of your info, 1Password can be a great product. And we're also hiring. So if you're looking for any potential opportunities, take a look at 1Password career page for roles that might be of interest to you. And without wasting too much time, I want to kind of jump into the session itself. Some of this content may be repetitive if you've attended the previous session, but I wanted to do like a quick overview of a couple of slides. So that way for folks who may be new to this session, they don't feel like this context is lost or not provided. So who is this meetup for? This meetup is actually catering to a lot of audience of different types. So you may be someone who may be preparing for interviews. System design is one of those interview slots, which actually shows up in a lot of different types of interviews. This often shows up in interviews. Let's say you're interviewing for software engineering roles. This is also very commonly found in engineering management interviews. Additionally, this is probably not like a norm in most companies, but some companies actually do, where technical product and project manager roles can often also have a system design as part of their on-site kind of loop. Additionally, if you're someone who is interested in building on your system design skill set, this meetup will hopefully give you exactly that. And if you're early in your career or just want to expand your knowledge on different types of challenges, or essentially you just want to learn to build how to build scalable systems, Another thing that I want to add is most system design prep content is garbage and it's not very effective. And part of the reason why this meetup came about was we want to make that content better and also provide a way where you can actually tie in real world problems to solutions, and it doesn't feel like kind of like a scratch pad sort of thing. Cool. And before we go into the details, I wanted to add a few caveats as you start to think about system design interviews in general. I absolutely want to stress and, absolutely want to add that most system design interviews require a bit of prep. I have talked to numerous engineers, numerous engineering managers who have probably been knee deep in really complex problems, but often come out of system design interviews saying, wow, I wish I had prepared for this thing. So it's super important for you to prepare. The reason being, if you think about it, you essentially have 1 hour to impress the interviewer. And if you look back, a lot of applications that we love to use, they weren't built in an hour, but you kind of have to. Additionally, another thing that I also like to add is there's no one perfect solution when it comes to system design. I definitely want to add a huge disclaimer that there's no one size fits all approach in system design. And the sooner you embrace it, it gets better in your preparation. And the most important aspect that I want to say is, it's an avenue where your background gets to shine. You may be someone who is, really an expert in databases, or someone who is expert in front-end engineering, or, DevOps. Can be a lot of different avenues. Make sure that your background, your experience actually speaks out a lot, and you kind of get to show, your expertise to the interviewer. So always keep that in mind. It's not just about like a question and answer thing, but rather, hey, what are areas in which you excel for the problem that we are actually discussing? And you will also hear a ton of products that I reference as part of these sessions. They're primarily here for references because a lot of these products we love to use, and it's also common knowledge. However, the content that you see in the presentation here is not really how these products are built, but rather one way of looking at it. If we had to really look about how Instagram or YouTube or Amazon was built, they have hundreds of thousands of engineers, very complex product. So I don't think we'll be able to fit that into like a presentation. But hopefully these are just references and something that we've kind of consulted online and for people who work there. And I think this is one of those things where, maybe this is a me thing where I'm someone who likes going back to the first principles. Sometimes it's super important to like really stop and ask questions like, why does it work this way? Or, hey, this doesn't make sense. I really want to figure out how XYZ works. When you're preparing for your system design interviews, don't be afraid to go down to the basics. It can be literally in the form of what is the difference between REST versus gRPC? What is a relational database? What is a NoSQL database? What's integer overflow? Can be literally anything. The more prepared you are, the more comfortable you are going to be as you kind of approach these interviews. And I also wanted to add a quick disclaimer of what we will and what we will not cover as part of today's session. So in today's session, we will explore some interesting questions which are centered around search. We will also explore some of the popular tech stacks, kind of to tie in the high level principles or designs to real world products or tech stacks that you may know or most companies use when they build such product. And we'll also provide useful resources for future reference, which highly recommend for folks to either look up online or any way where you feel like you can go into more depth. What we will not do in today's session is we will not be going into the algorithms around search, such as edit distance. We will not be covering all possible tech stacks. It's quite a lot. If we had to do a deep dive of tech stacks, it's probably multiple sessions on its own. So the goal here is to introduce you to those tech stacks and to provide you an overview and really to make you think about how to build and design these systems. Cool. And I'm gonna quickly check if there's any questions on chat. I don't see any questions, so I think we're good to essentially go ahead. So the first question that you may have had is, hey, why is search important? Well, I think the simple answer is, yep, users need to find stuff. And there's actually a ton of interesting nuances around search. If you look at some of the most popular kind of applications that we've all grown to use, in Amazon, when you type in your search box, it gives you a list of products. If you do like a @ and then type few names, for example, Instagram gives you either the people or the other Instagram handles or accounts. Similarly in Slack, when you're doing @ and then type the name, it gives you like a suggestions of people who are in your organizations, which are ordered by either people you more often talk to or people who might be relevant based on different criteria. So search is in a lot of different aspects, and it's also used in a lot of different ways across different parts of the product. So very important, very core, and it also makes our life easy. So hopefully today we'll dive into the different aspects of search. All right, I have given a lot of spiel. Let's kind of get into the fun stuff, which is let's actually build something. So the first thing that we are going to talk about today is we are going to build an autocomplete system. And next up, we'll be talking about a bit more advanced search. That is, once you type something into the search box, how does it actually give you the thing that you're looking for? So to start off with, what is a search autocomplete system? So if you type, a few letters in your, let's say, Amazon search box, it actually gives you a bunch of recommendations. Like, for example, in the screenshot that you see, when I type pen, it tells, pens, pencils, pencil pouch, all sort of fun searches. So this is essentially the system that you have been tasked with building. So one thing that I absolutely want to encourage people is when you're presented with with such a problem, especially in system design interviews, do not go into problem solving mode. I highly recommend everybody to literally stop and think and ask clarifying questions. It's super important to actually, make sure you understand the different nuances of the system that you're trying to build rather than jumping into the problem solving mode itself. And one thing I like to do is I like to use like a system design blueprint. One thing that I've highlighted is, your interview is essentially just 1 hour. If you jump into the interview into problem solving mode, you end up wasting a lot of time and you may design a system that was not really what was asked of. So do not do that. Remember, you have 1 hour. So be very strategic about how you use your time. I kind of break it down into different phases, where phase 1 is essentially understand and define scope. This is the part of the interview where it's super important to bring up functional requirements. Hey, what is the system that we are building for? What are the number of users? What is it actually doing? It can also go into non-functional requirements, such as, what is the scale of the system? What is the latency? Interesting things such as that. And then once you feel like you have a good overview of the system that you're trying to build, that's when you kind of get into the planning and the getting buy-in stage. I kind of tagged it as a get buy-in stage because I want you to feel like this is a discussion rather than like a question and answer thing. It's super helpful to ask the interviewer that, hey, this is what I'm thinking, and this is the system I'm planning to build. Does this look good? Thumbs up, because I feel like, interviewers also appreciate when interviewees ask for, make it a discussion and feel like this is truly something you're collaborating on. This is where you'll probably spend a good amount of time. And then once you feel like you have a good buy-in, you then go into deep dive. This can be in the form of, algorithms. For example, in the previous session, we touched into a ticket generator, like an ID generator. And for ID generator, the algorithm itself is the meat of the issue. This can also flow into, system design. What is the data flow like? Or what is the why, what, how of the trade-offs that you might be making as you think through different pieces. And then at the end, take at least 5 minutes to summarize, hey, this is the system we wanted to build, and this is how we have decided to build it under the constraints that we thought might work well. So going back, applying this blueprint, and what I want you all to do is start with understanding and defining the scope. So now you're presented with a question to design a search autocomplete system where you can essentially search for products that exist within your application. So I want to keep this as an interactive session. So would love to see what are some clarifying questions that folks would ask. So feel free to just drop them into your Zoom chat, and we'll take like a minute or so. So what are some of the questions that you would want to get answers for when you're presented with this problem? Again, this is a safe space, so feel free to type into this Zoom chat. Yeah, keep it going. Thank you for folks who are jumping in. Cool. So we have Ramya who mentioned, do we need to specify English as a search language? That's a great question. You often want to ask, localization. Since this is text-based search, it's super important to clarify, hey, what languages are we actually planning to support? What is the character limit? Again, another brilliant question. This will help you understand what is the limitation of the system that you're trying to build. And then will this search be universal search, or will be specific to certain category? Again, brilliant question. This is exactly something you absolutely want to clarify with the interviewer. Who is your user? How much traffic that you're that you will be expecting? Great question. What search criteria? What are the constraints? Target space, search history. Awesome. These are great questions. And should we search and suggest for each character, or wait until we hit? So these are, again, great follow-up questions, and these are exactly the type of questions that you should be asking your interviewer. So let me advance the slide. So some of you already highlighted this. When you're presented with such a question, you want to ask, hey, what are we actually matching against? Like, what are we actually searching? Then the interviewer may say something like, okay, well, we are actually going to search product names. This was also something that many of you highlighted. What is the matching criteria like? Then the interviewer may say something like, well, it's only the beginning letters, and then let's keep it as a 2-character minimum. And then this is something many folks highlighted as well, hey, does it actually need localization? Does it need spell check? For example, in the screenshot that you saw, we typed PEN. What if user enters PNs, KIL or something like that? So do we want to accommodate spell checks? Additionally, do we also care about casing, like uppercase, lowercase? Does that really matter? So you want to really ask such questions because the interviewer gets to know that, you are actually thinking about a lot of different edge cases, which is always a really good thing. So the interviewer may say something like, hey, you know what? No need to support that at this moment. There was also someone who mentioned about scale. You also want to understand, who are your users? What is the scale that you need to support? How many product names are we expected to search? So the interviewer may say something like, okay, let's build for 1 million DAU, 10 million product names, and whatnot. And then what type of results should be returned? And then you may hear back something like, we want to return top 5 most frequently searched item. And then keep in mind, frequency is very important. It's not just any 5 items that match the criteria that the user is searching for. It's top 5 most frequently searched items. So hopefully by now, everybody feels like, okay, now I understand the system a little more. And that's when you can actually start thinking about, okay, I understand the system now. Let me actually go into, planning and figuring out how I want to build the system. As you kind of start thinking about the next stage, always keep in mind that no interviewer is expecting you to land at the solution immediately. They want you to help. They want you to actually, help them understand the thought process or your thought process, that how are you thinking about solving these problems? What are some good ways, not so good ways? What are some ugly ways? What are some maybe good ways to go about it? So they really want to kind of, understand how you think through these problems. It's often not about the solution that you may be presenting. So take the time. Some of the initial suggestions that you come up with may not really be efficient, and that's perfectly okay. And so hopefully this gives you a good understanding of what type of questions that you want to ask. And thank you for everyone for jumping in. So next up, you essentially want to get into planning and getting buy-in state. So for many folks who have interacted with databases, specifically for relational databases, relational database provides something called as like a like search within your I clearly formatted my query wrong. The single quote should have been a little bit later. So I apologize for the formatting error. So in databases, you essentially have a query which says something like select star from DB underscore table, where name, like, and then a text percentage. So a lot of relational databases essentially provide you this this query. For example, let's say you were searching for names which begin with an A, where you can essentially say select star from DB table, where name, like, A percentage. When you say A percentage, it basically says starting with the letter A, and then the rest of the characters can be anything. Similarly, you can also say, let's say it ends with an A, you can say select star from DB table, where name, like, percentage A, where the beginning can be anything, but the ending has to be in the character A. So if you think about it, this is actually a decent way to actually search for autocomplete. So anytime looking back at that screenshot, so whenever the user, let's say, enters PE, you can basically kick off a database search which says select star from DB table, where name, like, PE percentage. And, that may actually solve the problem. Well, not really. Can folks think through why this actually doesn't help, or what are some problems that we may run into if we just end up depending on this query for type ahead or autocomplete? Yeah, so we've had folks who mentioned, too many results. You can, in SQL queries, you can basically add limit 5. So there's some way to kind of go about it. But again, definitely too many results. There were some mentions about, too much time, absolutely slow, irrelevant responses. That is a great catch, because if you look back at what we really wanted to build, we really wanted to also cater in frequency. So yes, that is definitely not something this solves. Yes, this can also be a huge performance bottleneck. You're hitting DB too frequently, 100%. So this is exactly the reason why this doesn't really work. Do not forget about the scale and performance of the system that you're trying to build. And then one can actually say, hey, what about I can just add an index, right? If you worked with databases, you can basically add an index on a column to speed up your searches. Quite often, you'll see indexes added on columns such as, let's say, time or any commonly searched terminology. You can have, singular indexes or complex indexes. Again, indexes can be of any form. But it still doesn't really yeah. So again, great suggestion. It will not be efficient use of database. Absolutely great call out. So we started with, hey, we can maybe use a database search, and then then we kind of decided that, hey, you know what, it's not performant, it doesn't scale, it doesn't meet the exact type of system that we want to build. And to kind of taking it back into what we are trying to build. So if you look at the product details, I literally just took a snapshot of Amazon, so that way I don't have to create this slide, a quick and lazy way to create my product details page. So if you look at the product details page, Amazon provides a bunch of information in there. And it's kind of important to literally take a step back and draw a DB model of what is exactly that we are trying to query. So you can quickly put together like a DB model of, hey, maybe I need like a products table where it'll have things such as, the name of the product, the seller, price, description. Seller can be a foreign key because, often you want to track sellers, which are more unique. And again, they don't expect you to literally do an exact map of this page, but try to kind of, outline what are the most important columns. And someone actually pointed this out, that what exactly are we searching here? So that's a great call out. So as you start to think through it, you want to clarify with the interviewer that, hey, are we actually searching name? Are we also searching description? And that's where you kind of get into, okay, this is exactly how these are some of the columns that you need to kind of pre-process or kind of think through. I would say it's super helpful to draw a DB model layer. So it's clear you are, you're clearly communicating what you will be searching on. It doesn't have to be perfect, and you can also iterate along and make improvements. Sometimes the interviewer may be like, hey, why don't you draw out what the seller table will look like, what the user table will look like? So feel free to draw out different follow-up questions that may be presented to you as part of your conversation. Awesome. And one thing I did want to highlight is, what if we just add an index in a database? Most databases use B trees for indexing. This may work if the size of the DB is small enough, but keep in mind, indexes are expensive. They do take a little bit of memory footprint, and indexes are also not very sufficient. For the scope of this question, we have still not addressed the point of, the frequency of the words, because we are still not optimizing our search around frequency. So something, just worth talking through and saying, this doesn't really solve our problem. Awesome. So let's actually see how we can solve this frequency problem. So maybe this is a good time to introduce like a frequency table for the different keywords that show up in that the user is searching for. You essentially want to track what is the frequency that this word has occurred. So this might be another table that you are essentially tracking. Again, feel free, you can also add a ton of other metadata in here. For the purpose of this conversation, kept it kind of super simple. Awesome. So to give you a bit more insight, your keyword frequency table, this can have something like, pencil was searched, has a frequency of 45 times, pen 30 times. So whenever, let's say someone types of, in your autocomplete box, when they type PEN, you'll basically respond with the top 5, prefix prefixes that match and sorted by frequency, essentially. So you're kind of getting more into kind of like that problem solving mode, and you've kind of outlined the DB layer, what will not work, and then you're getting towards yes. So Neetu, first of all, thank you. This is exactly where we are actually going to dive into. So we clearly see that database searches with indexes still really doesn't solve our problem. So how can we really build for faster lookup and also factor in frequency as we build this system? So one data structure that often you might have heard is using something called as a trie. So for folks who might be new to a trie is essentially, a type of tree where your root nodes are essentially, a character. And then as you traverse the root nodes, new characters essentially get added. So for example, I've built a simple trie here where, the root is empty, and then root has a child nodes PQR. For P, you'll have further child nodes such as PE, PL, and then for PE, you'll have child nodes such as pen, pencil, all sorts of things. So as you traverse through the tree, you're kind of traversing your kind of autocomplete kind of boxes. Keep in mind, the interviewer isn't really expecting you to codify the solution. They're rather interested in help understand how you're applying concepts, and designing systems that meet the requirement that they are hoping to solve. So one question you might have is, hey, Pooja, you still keep forgetting about frequency. What about that? Great call out. It's super important to figure out how we can factor in frequency. So one approach is you can add frequency to the child nodes. Well, wouldn't traversing the nodes, especially like, if let's say someone types PE, you still have to traverse the entire subtree of PE to actually find the top 5 results. That actually does take quite a lot of time. So it's good, but still not really performant. So let's actually apply one more optimization. So one optimization is, what if we cache top 5 results at each node? So let's say a user types PE rather than traversing the entire tree. PE itself also has data where top 5, PE, like top 5 results with a prefix of P are already available. So it kind of makes the lookup a lot more faster. Yes, so you still have to go through the other options to get the child nodes, but right now, as part of the context of the question, we are primarily interested to only look at the top 5 search results. So this optimization kind of helps us, improve performance that way. Yep, absolutely. Another great call out, which we'll in fact be talking about just about now. So someone brought up the point about, hey, maybe we can also introduce caching. 100%. So now that we kind of outlined that, hey, maybe I can just use like a try for, maybe I can just use a try for building the system. So this is kind of like a high level design of a potential system that you can build. You have your multiple users. The first point of contact, often, especially for applications of scale, is having a load balancer. One of the another amazing things about having a load balancer is you can also introduce API rate limiting as part of your load balancer. So that way you can kind of reduce all of the bad actors. Quite often, you also want to follow like a microservice-based architecture. You want an auth service. You want a bunch of different services. Not important for the question. We'll kind of dive into what are the most important services. We want to have something called like the query service, where anytime a query comes in, we are looking up the try cache. And then if try cache doesn't have that information, we'll replenish it from the DB. And you might also ask, hey, how are we actually keeping this try updated? We can have something like an update service where this can be like a nightly build or an hourly build or a weekly build based on how often your data changes. And the update service is responsible for keeping your cache and DB kind of up to date. So hopefully this gives you like a snapshot of what that system can look like. Keep in mind, system design is where you get to leverage your background. If there are parts of the system design where you are an expert at, let's say you're someone who is an expert in document stores, absolutely jump into how a document store can be used to build a try. If you're someone who is expert of, let's say, microservice-based architecture, talk about why you would want to introduce microservices, what the, how the microservices would be talking to each other, what is the good amount of services, why when you don't want to re-architect or over-architect things. So kind of go into areas which are in your wheelhouse and, talk through, go into kind of a deep dive mode of things that you are a subject matter expert on. Again, as I mentioned, this 100 different ways of designing a system. So design a system where you get to show what you're knowledgeable in. Awesome. And one question that folks may have asked or thought about is, hey, it's cool that you're thinking of a try DB, but how exactly are you planning to store a try? For TryDB, you can actually use like a document store such as MongoDB. You can also use like a key value store such as DynamoDB, where your key is your prefix and your value can be the data or the results that you're actually looking for. Sure. Let me go back. So are there any maybe specific questions that you might be looking for? Feel free to just, type ahead into Zoom. Because I don't know if you're able to provide a voiceover. Okay, so so in this case, the load balancer is essentially like a system which front loads all of the requests. You often don't want users directly interacting with the services that you have built. Sometimes, there may be bad actors where, they are blasting off, hundreds of thousands of API requests, or they are overloading the system. There might be denial of service attacks that might be happening, or there may be some good actors, such as, let's say there's 10 million users who are trying to access your system at any given time. So the load balancer kind of manages the requests, and the API rate limiters, which often can be coupled with the load balancers, also provide a way where your service is not being throttled. So the load balancer really is just one way of kind of going about it, and then you kind of can have different features kind of built into that. And Another question was, what do the auth service and the query service do? So the auth service is, basically a service which authenticates users into the application. We kind of want to talk about like a microservice-based architecture that you want into the application. I just threw that in there to just show the microservices part. It's actually not relevant for this discussion, but it's worth just mentioning it that, hey, maybe I'm also thinking about other services. So auth service, think about it as a service that, logs people in, results in signups, or this can also be something where new sellers get onboarded onto the platform. Can be a lot of different things. And then another thing was the query service. So the query service is actually the one that is giving you the responses. So all of your search requests will kind of go through the query service, and it's going, the query service is the one that's actually doing the lookups in your try cache. So hopefully that answers the question. Yeah, so another great question. So search is, there's a lot of different, flavors of search. For the purpose of the system, we were primarily interested in building a system where frequency was factored in. Sometimes the interviewer may also be like, hey, show the top relevant results of a specific user. So for example, I'm someone who buys a lot of color pens or crayons because I have a little toddler. So surfacing results which kind of match what I may have previously searched or my search history can be a good optimization as well. So I would say the search results, there is a way where you can say maybe we can get to like faster search results. Maybe it's cached at the user level. So let's say your system is built that way. So maybe the system results can be faster, but it's still only surfacing part of the search result, I would say. But yeah, these are definitely variations of the system as you kind of think through the different nuances. Yeah, so this is kind of getting into the category where maybe the search results need to be optimized at a country level, or maybe based on a location. For the purpose of this question, it's primarily centered around frequency, so probably not important, but definitely worth mentioning. This can also be like a good follow-up question by the interviewer. In fact, I'm going to talk about some of the follow-up questions soon. So yes, that can be a variation. So feel free to talk through how you might go about it. When a user is using VPN, we really can't do much around that. Maybe we just stick to the locale that the user signed up in, or maybe the address in which they have it as default address. So again, different ways in which you can kind of go about it. Cool. So we have less than 10 minutes. I'm going to pace through the rest of the slides. Cool. So we talked about how a TriDB can be built either using a document store or key value store. If you're someone who has worked with document stores or key value stores before, feel free to jump into how you can actually implement it. Hey, this is how I'm planning to store my information in DynamoDB. Feel free to talk through why DynamoDB might be a good choice. Interviewer really isn't looking for like the perfect answer. They're really just looking to understand how you're thinking through, the problem, the systems, and whatnot. Cool. And other potential questions and follow-ups, which one of the user, I believe one of the attendees, Mary, highlighted. So, sometimes you may also want to have browser caching. Sometimes you also maybe want to have in-memory TriDBs. You also maybe want to talk about sharding strategies if the interviewer kind of gets into the scale of the system. We also didn't really address localization because that is not how we wanted to build a system. Maybe you want to have varied autocomplete suggestions based on country. Maybe you can have like, a try dedicated to each kind of country and then letters and whatnot. And then another kind of fun thing, especially let's say you are on, a lot of social media websites is, maybe you want to introduce recency bias. Maybe you want to surface like trending topics or topics that are trending higher up in the search results. So kind of think through ways. There may be different follow-ups that the interviewer may ask, and think through how you can kind of modify your existing system to actually accommodate the follow-ups that may be presented to you. Cool. And I don't think we'll have a ton of time to go into this. However, this is fun. So I'm going to talk through it at a very fast pace. So we talked about, cool. We got the autocomplete to work. Now when I type PEN, it's going to give me a bunch of suggestions. How do we actually list the products that match a keyword? In the screenshot that I presented, when I searched pen, Amazon gave me a bunch of product suggestions, such as Sharpie, Papermate, and a bunch of other kind of searches. So how does that actually work? So in the interest of time, just gonna speed through this. You kind of want to have a way to tie back your keywords to product. So one way of going about it is, what if I had a table where for every keyword that shows up in a product, I'm going to track which of these products this keyword shows up in. So for example, pen shows up in product 1 and product 2, pencil shows up in 2 and 3. Again, one more typing mistake. The fourth row is actually product 3. So ignore my typing mistake. So this will kind of give a way for you to track what keyword shows up in kind of different products. This is actually called as inverted index. And this is actually an algorithm or a search strategy that's used by a lot of common search indexing engines, such as Solar and Elasticsearch. This is the kind of algorithm they use under the hood. Again, you don't have to, go into the details of how Solar or Elasticsearch work, but presenting a way of how you would actually track or make this possible, that's essentially what the interviewer is looking for. I don't think the interviewer even cares if you know the term inverted index, but how would you kind of tie back keywords to the product? I think that's essentially what they're looking for. You can also have another question you might have is, how would you build an inverted index? You can maybe have like a database table, just like, the one we showed in here. You can also have like binary bits where a bit is activated if it shows up in that specific product. Additionally, you can have different pieces in the system, such as, a data indexing piece, a ranking piece. Someone brought up, in fact, the ranking piece. So your ranking algorithm can do that additional magic on top of indexing that we just talked about. Cool. All right, so I think we are just about towards the end of time. So hopefully this presented you folks with two different aspects of how search works within the realm of system design. And again, this is, hopefully a good introduction. There's a ton of interesting exploration that you can do. So if anything felt like, hey, I want to know more about it, definitely encourage everyone to kind of dive in and jump into how different things work. And then just wanted to share a few quick references. If you are preparing for your interviews, these are some references which I've personally used when I was preparing for these system design interviews, or when I was even doing these interviews for interviewers, interviewees. So do take a look, as they do have some good content. There's also a ton of free material available on YouTube. So I did not add those references here, but I will try to see how I can add those references maybe on the meetup page. Cool. We have a few minutes. Okay, so I'm going to quickly answer questions which I did not answer before, and then I want to get some suggestions from folks. So I think one question was, is the prior system design video available? Yes. Thank you, Pooja, for pulling that up. So that was my first video. So some of the recording may feel awkward. So hopefully I'm getting better at this thing. This video will also be uploaded on YouTube for future reference. Again, thank you for our Women Who Code volunteers for all of that. So I'll pause, and since we just have a few minutes, what would folks like to see in the future sessions? Few suggestions that I've got from folks is maybe like a newsfeed system, a chat application. How does nearby thing work, or proximity service work? So what are some things that folks might be interested to hear about in the future? Type your responses in the Zoom chat. Nearby, absolutely. Again, these are just few suggestions that I got previously. Feel free to, add anything else that you might be interested in. Okay. Yeah. Infinite scroll type apps, Outlook calendar. Calendar is actually a great suggestion. I'm definitely going to add that into the shortlist because it's one of those things where there's a ton of edge cases that you need to plan for. So I do like that question a lot myself. Yeah. Awesome. So I think we got some really good suggestions. So thank you so much, folks, for joining today's session.